Now, while the investing in African mining indaba is underway and the world is raving on about the continent's rich deposits of critical minerals, let's not forget the narrative remains Africa is one of the poorest continents with the richest endowments of natural resources. Securing supply of critical minerals has thus emerged as an important consideration at the Indaba, given South Africa's rich supply. On the back of this, we assess the region's mining landscape with Jee-A van der Linde, senior economist at Oxford Economics Africa. Thank you so much for your time here. Now, the world is scrambling for critical minerals and metals as countries work to secure a green future. How much power does Africa's mining industry have in delivering those resources?
Quite a lot. I mean, Western powers are definitely trying to break China's monopolies in critical mineral refining and electric vehicle battery manufacturing, which obviously presents several Southern African countries with an opportunity to become an integral part of the global critical mineral value chain. And if we look at a few examples, Namibia is known to be a well-endowed sort of country with a variety of critical minerals, and it is also one of the appealing mining investment destinations in SADC, thanks to its relatively attractive governance and infrastructure indicators compared with some of its other peers. Angola, South Africa, Zambia, Zimbabwe, are other salient mineral producers. With the DRC, I want to say a particularly exciting case. So, the DRC holds a dominant position in both copper and cobalt markets, ranking among the top 5 suppliers of copper globally, while being the leading cobalt producer. I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, the DRC is the source of nearly 70% of the world's mined cobalt. Now, that's quite a lot. But zinc production is also set to make a return in that country. So recently, the Kipushi mine in the DRC is set to reopen, with production expected to commence as early as the second quarter of 2024. Now, the site itself is known for high-grade zinc deposits, in addition to substantial endowments of other minerals, like I said, copper, but also lead, silver, and other minerals. So, why this matters is because, the mine's contribution will have a positive effect on export earnings. So, it improves the country's current account balance. It further, for example, underscores the DRC's strategic importance as a supplier of I want to say key minerals, with the likes of copper, cobalt, zinc, being a vital for the renewable energy transition. But in the grander scheme of things, there are risks, right? So there's this growing threat of increased resource nationalism. As governments, obviously, they see risks and opportunities as this energy transition gathers pace. And this could lead to inefficiencies and distorted trade flows, which could have an impact on prices. Namibia, for example, they ban unprocessed critical mineral exports. Zimbabwe has done the same for raw lithium exports. But it's not just Africa where we see this. For example, China has recently banned the export of graphite. The Indonesian government is seeking partners to set up a cartel for critical minerals, similar to OPEC. And Chile is also looking to nationalize lithium mining. So one can understand why governments are pushing for more value-added industries, but the implementation of export bans, I want to say, might perhaps not be the best or ideal way to go about it.
All right. Well, now that you've highlighted the who stands to gain the most in the race to green and also the potential risks, let's talk infrastructure. Are there any significant projects in the pipeline that can buff up Southern Africa's mining industry's efforts?
Well, you touched on an important point. There are several rail projects currently underway across Africa. So Namibia and Botswana are pushing hard for the Trans-Kalahari Railway project, in a bid to boost and advance regional trade connectivity. There have been a number of expressions of interest for public-private partnerships, which, if successful, would see a 1,500-kilometer rail line linking the coalfields in Botswana to Namibia's main port at Walvis Bay. The development of the Lobito corridor is another interesting one, and might be a game changer for the region. So, the Lobito Railway, just a bit of background, is also known as the Benguela Railway. It runs from the port of Lobito on the Atlantic coast of Angola all the way to the mining towns in the DRC. It was actually once one of the busiest railroads in Africa in the 1970s, but changed following the Angolan civil war, and it hasn't really been able to bounce back since. Yeah. But nevertheless, the 1,700-kilometer track offers significant potential to boost regional mineral trade by essentially giving the copper belt, which is situated in the DRC and Zambia, a direct route to Western markets. And in fact, recently the US added copper to its list of critical minerals for the first time. So I think the Lobito corridor is an example of both the Angolan government's eagerness for private foreign capital investment, to diversify the economy away from oil. Yeah. But it's also, it's also a push to reduce the country's reliance on China for investment. Yeah. And then on the flip side, the Lobito corridor, I think, presents a massive opportunity for the US and the European Union to advance their influence in Africa and diversify their critical mineral supply chain. So, the stakes are quite high in that sense.
Yeah. I mean, just as we wrap up the conversation, I mean, of course, as the world's demand for critical minerals expands, we do need to make sure that we have the capability to move those commodities out of the continent. What impact could the logistics bottlenecks, for example, the ones that we're experiencing with Transnet, have on the region of Southern Africa?
Yeah, that's a perennial issue. I think, if I could answer this way, one of the catalysts for developing the Lobito corridor, as I just explained, is the fact that ports that have been favored the most by mineral exporters, in the likes of DRC and Zambia, are facing serious congestion and backlog issues with clearing shipping containers. Yeah. Currently, copper concentrates from the DRC and Zambia, for example, that are destined for overseas markets are trucked, via thousands of kilometers of roads to the ports of, Durban, Dar es Salaam, Beira, and Walvis Bay. But even before, the copper reaches the ports, the payloads are delayed due to truck drivers, having to face poor conditions, road conditions, long queues, sometimes up to 50 kilometers, and they have to wait awful long time to get through customs and border crossings. So, it's quite clear, as I said, how investment in railways will help to address the problem, by cutting transport times, by avoiding traffic jams and border queues. But it's more than that, I would say. It's infrastructure deficiencies, such as shortages of cranes and straddle carriers, outdated ICT technology, and unmaintained equipment are also causing unnecessary pressure on Southern African ports. So, if we look at global trends, there's a real opportunity for Southern African economies. That's to say, if they get it right this time. Yeah. And because critical minerals that are deemed essential to a country's economic development or national security, they don't really have viable substitutes, and they are therefore quite vulnerable to supply chain disruptions. So that's why it's important for African countries to establish themselves as a reliable mineral exporter.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and for your insights. They really appreciate it. That was Jee-A Linde, senior economist at Oxford Economics Africa.